I realized I was making you personally responsible for my emotions in that moment. And when you said, how did I do? And the answer is, you were failing miserably. And it's because you actually can't regulate my emotions for me. It's not something that another person is capable of. We have to regulate our own emotions. If you're seeking the outside world to regulate you in your behalf, then you're going to create some problems.
Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge. A couple of weeks ago, when we were we hadn't even made it to the podcasting studio yet. We were just intending to record the podcast. And we ended up in quite a bit of a fight. And I want to say that we ended up in a fight, but the truth is that I was actually just really mad at you. And you were trying to manage my anger. Now, a little backstory.
How did I do? Did I do a good job?
Well, no, which sparked this entire, it's going to spark this 5 podcast series, actually. We're going to do 5 episodes on the topic I'm about to introduce.
Okay.
All right. But you didn't do a good job, but you weren't supposed to do a good job. And so that's why, anyway, all of this will make sense in a moment. Okay. So a little backstory is that there was a time when I feel like I was being dragged into the studio kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
I was having a very hard time podcasting. I went through a real difficult, moment there when I don't know if I just got to the end of the line and I was like, okay, I'm done. I just didn't want to do it anymore. It might be, and actually most likely is that we were in a very stressful time period.
Yeah.
On personal and financial and business stuff. It was just a squeeze time period. And the last thing I wanted to do was go into a studio and talk about personality types and pin a smile on my face and do podcasting. So during that time period, there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of not wanting to do it. There was a lot of, trying to convince me to get to 500 episodes, which is probably one of the reasons why on the 500th episode, I was like, that's right, I made it to 500, because I just really didn't for a while there. I just really didn't want a podcast. So there was a bit of muscle memory that got baked into some of those episodes, or at least not into the episode. Well, hopefully not into the episodes themselves. I mean, some people might be able to go oh, I know which episodes you didn't want to do, Antonia. I could tell. But I actually think I did a pretty good job muscling through. But the muscle memory came from the resistance of coming into the studio at all. And so at a certain point, we realized, or at least I realized, that I was basically causing fights. If you said anything, even the tiniest little bit off, because there are certain days that we podcast, right? They're Mondays as a general rule. At the time of this recording, we've been using Mondays to record podcasts for, at this point, years. And every Monday morning, I just start to not feel very good. I just kind of have a little bit of an attitude. And then I'd get what we call camera ready, which means, it's you do your hair, I do my hair and makeup and try to look moderately presentable, because it's going to be forever. And then when I was getting ready, if you said, or when I would get ready, if you said anything, even tiny little bit off, I would just immediately go into what do you mean by that? Right. And then
you took things more serious those days.
Oh, so personal. So
one little joke I make, you could
that's
ruin
right.
your whole day
it
very
could ruin
easily.
The whole day. And so you and I had to do a lot of work to get to the other side of that. And it took a fair amount of work just to even figure the pattern out at all. It was why are podcasting days so difficult? Why is this always a problem? And then once we figured it out, then I had to deprogram myself. And I think there's a little bit of muscle memory that came into the dynamic, right? The relationship as an entity got this baked into it.
Yeah.
Which was before, podcasting was always about fighting, right? That was something we had to dial back.
Well, we don't get to record that day, and then I'm stressed because now we have to do 2 next Monday, and if we don't do it next Monday, now we got to do 3. It starts to stack up, and we're going to be late if we don't get on this, and so now I've got pressure to get through and get something done. So my patience now starts to wear, and it starts to become a dynamic.
Yes.
A cycle that happens.
That's right.
And we had to do a lot of work to not have that cycle keep going.
So much. All right. So we're back to things being like good, right? Like, I mean, actually I enjoy podcasting. I go, oh yeah, we can go podcast. That's cool. So I think we're in a much better space, but so all of this is culminating in 2 Mondays ago where, or maybe, I think it was 2 Mondays ago. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
It was recently
where that kicked up again. And it had been a while. It had been a while that we had been in that dynamic. And so I think because I was able to see or to get some distance, I was able to get some, I had gotten enough distance from it being a regular dynamic that when it happened again, I had enough space to go, wait a minute, what's going on? Why am I doing this? And yes, I had all of the explanations that we had patterned from before. This is why it's happening, muscle memory, blah, 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 blah. But a thought struck me, and it kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I realized I'm making Joel responsible for my emotional regulation. Now, there's a concept called self-regulation. And I had heard about it and read about it in terms of what you could call somatic regulation.
Yeah.
Regulating your own nervous system, regulating your own body. And I knew that it was important to do that. And it's kind of a bit of a buzz term, in some therapeutic circles or some personal development circles. And so, like there's sometimes you get used to or hear a phrase and you kind of have to try to figure out what it means for you, especially if it's abstract, like somatic regulation. But it struck me at that moment what it really meant for me and us. I was making you personally responsible for my emotions in that moment. And when you said, how did I do? And the answer is, you were failing miserably. You were not regulating my emotions. You were doing a terrible job. And it's because you actually can't regulate my emotions for me. It's not something that another person is capable of. We have to regulate our own emotions. And then suddenly, like a light shone and like the heavens opened and sunbeams came down and angels started singing. And I went, oh, this is every fight we've ever had, at least from my side, is I'm trying to get you to regulate me in my behalf. And no wonder they go on so long. And no wonder I get so upset. And no wonder we have those battles.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to get you to do the impossible. And I'm just assuming that we go until, like I burn myself out or whatever. I mean, I know that that's not the full story of all of our fights. I'm sure that there's something going on for you. Yeah. But at least for me, I just had this moment of clarity of like, oh, I'm doing this to him. He's not doing something to me. I'm doing something to him.
So when you said we can't regulate other people's emotions, I immediately think of being a father. And when my kids would fall and scrape their knee or hurt themselves, they had a physical trauma, right? They hurt themselves, or actually their knee actually hurts or bleeding. But you, as a parent, this. Anybody that's been a parent, you kiss the boo-boo, right? You kiss the knee or the elbow they bumped, and immediately they start feeling better because what I would imagine, you're helping them regulate their emotions. You're helping. When you kiss a boo-boo for a child, you are, in a way, helping another person regulate emotions. So maybe get more nuance to that. Are you saying that it's still the child that's doing it? Like you can't be inside of somebody else's experience. So even if I'm kissing my daughter's boo-boo on her elbow, she still is technically doing the work herself. But I don't think she knows that she's regulating, right? She's using my soft indicator, like my scooping her up and being gentle with her as a way to calm herself down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just maybe more nuance there. Are you saying that's not what's actually happening in that scenario?
So there's the thing called co-regulation where you can assist another person in their regulation.
Okay.
But you can't do it for them. So in that moment, yes, and children learn regulation through their parents. They learn how to self-regulate by modeling their parents and taking a cue from, like, if the parent says this is not that big of a deal, right? And they're not like marginalizing the kid's feelings or invalidating them. They're just like expressing.
Unless they're a Gen Xer.
Right, yeah.
Unless they're our generation, like, get over yourself.
That's true. I tend to do that a lot.
Just amputate the leg and let's move on. Okay.
Some Gen Xers are helicopter parents. It's weird. But yes, it is true. I have a tendency to do that, and I have to make sure I don't. But that said, if you're trying to give your child some perspective on the size of the problem, children take cues from parents and help co-regulate them because they're young and they don't know how to do it. But when you're an adult and you're trying to get the other person to regulate you in your behalf, then I guess you could call it a form of co-regulation, but that's an unhealthy version.
So I see these posts online, on Instagram, on X, on Facebook. There'll be somebody at like a fast food restaurant or a restaurant, and somebody's order didn't get properly processed, or they didn't get the refund they wanted. And like, I'm watching these videos, like somebody like leaping over the counter and like crashing and breaking things behind the counter, or screaming at people, or, you know, throwing their coffee at somebody and slamming the door and in, you know, absolute meltdown, or falling on the ground and kicking like a toddler. I guess immediately I go, that person wants the outside world to regulate them.
Yes.
Like they feel like I can't handle my own emotions. I need all of you to take care of this for me. And so I'm going to thrash and emote wildly until somebody else can calm me down or help regulate my emotions for me.
Yeah. And that's that's a person that didn't get good enough modeling when they were a child, or their parents or their caretakers didn't basically train them to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And so as an adult, they're still looking to the outside world, to parent figures or to people who will come save them and regulate their emotions in their behalf, which, again, as a child, I mean, even as an adult, there's like versions of it where you can do healthy co-regulation. But that's more contractual. That's based on the relationship itself.
Sure.
You cannot enter a regulatory relationship with the entire planet of humans. Like, they're not going to do it for you. And so if you're seeking the outside world to regulate you in your behalf, then you're going to create some problems. But I think probably at this point, we should define terms.
Okay.
Does that work?
I like that a lot.
Okay.
Let's define our terms.
Okay. So when we say regulation, what are we talking about? When we say self-regulate or co-regulate, if a person's not regulated, it's called dysregulation. What are we talking about? And we're basically talking about a person's ability to manage their own internal states. So in what's nice about personality type terms and understanding cognitive functions
gives us a map.
Is it gives us a map for the different ways that a person can manage internal states or self-regulate. And I would put down the internal states that we're managing ourselves when we're self-regulating. The three that are the most common in psychological terms, like the ones that are usually referenced when people train and talk about the importance of self-regulation, is physiological or somatic self-regulation. So being able to regulate your own central nervous system, you know, when you're all spiked up or all anxious or frayed nerves or whatever, the ability to, you know, do breathing, calm yourself down, get in a more regulated state, calm your breathing down, that sort of thing. So that's the first one, is physiological or somatic regulation. The second one is cognitive regulation. And that first one you could tell kind of tracks to, in type terms, personality type terms, you could call them like sensing function style, right? The body, how we're experiencing things, our relationship to the present moment, the relationship to our own experience and being inside of our bodies. So you could call them like sensing somatic regulation. Cognitive would be the ability to regulate one's thoughts, problem-solving capacities, the challenges that the world throws at us.
What about beliefs?
Our beliefs, right? Our self-talk.
Yeah.
The limiting beliefs that we have, and not necessarily buying them so much. And then also the ability to stay calm when we feel overwhelmed by projects or tasks, when something feels like too big to be able to handle. And we have to, kind of chunk it down and understand that, you one bite at a time, right? Or whatever. And so those would be cognitive regulation, self-regulation, and that would be tracking more the thinking functions. And then there's emotional regulation, right? And the ability to manage one's states, emotional states and interpersonal states, right? The ability to kind of process one's own emotions and feelings and understand how things are making you feel, but then also being able to stay present in relationships and the ability to, to not take everything so personally.
Yeah.
Right? and to not see, like the relational information we give each other, the emotional relational information, to make sure that that's not something that's all, also creating a lot of spikes, right? A lot of dysregulated feelings. And that would track with the feeling functions. And then this is not usually one that's talked about in traditional conversations around this topic, but there is an aspect that people talk about, existential coping. And I would add personally, existential regulation.
Yeah.
And existential regulation is anything that relates to existence itself. So our meaning, our patterns, how we think the future is going to, to roll out, our worries or concerns about, why things are happening the way they are, like the unseen forces in life. And I think we need to regulate ourselves in that domain as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add a fourth one to the conversation and call it existential regulation, which would be the intuitive functions.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for going through those definitions on the kind of using a map of personality types to mark out the sensory, physical body, our thought processes, emotions, and even the abstractions of our intuition. I think it's a really good way to see it. I'm more and more seeing personality types as a topography, not just a typography, right? Mm-hmm. Topography, like a map to find parts of ourselves that topically relate to other things, but we can find them within ourselves using type as a guide for this. We talk a little bit about, and we're going to go here in a minute to define this idea of, so the best practice is to regulate this as a practice in your life, like probably in a hygienic way. Like you're just doing self-regulation all the time so that you don't have to, your spikes are a lot less. But we have moments of life when we have a moment, somebody cuts us off in traffic and we get all upset and we want to flip them off. We have to go, okay, I got to calm down. I can't have road rage right now. Or our order is wrong at the store, or somebody did slight us, or we feel something happened and we have to kind of overcome that. And I think mostly we see this, it's obvious when somebody's emotionally having this experience, mm-hmm. sometimes physically, but emotionally I think is at the top. That's like the pin at the top. We notice it always. I don't know if we always notice when somebody is in the immediate needing to regulate cognitively with mm-hmm. their thoughts, because they're not necessarily emoting as much.
Yeah.
And so it's not as obvious as the emotional ones. And the physical ones, you can just see the physical body needing, help. And so it could just be, hyperventilation or something. That's like an emotional regulation, or somebody's like shivering, or their actual physical nervous system is out of place. Yeah. But I think the emotions seem to be the most obvious, and then probably the physical body next. And then I think cognitively, and then certainly intuitively or existentially.
I think we're coding the cognitive and existential as also emotional and somatic. I think we think of all of them as either emotional regulation or physiological regulation, but it actually could be cognitive or existential.
Absolutely. I think so. If we think about regulation in two different broad categories, like I mentioned, this more maintenance of it, hygiene of it, and then more the acute triage of it, let's just say.
Like spike points.
I look at, who was it, Karl Marx, that talked about religion being the opiate of the masses? I think he's the one that has that quote. It's immediately, that came to my mind as you were talking about this, and I went, actually, religion solves the maintenance of this. It solves the regulation for us. That's why probably religions became viable, is it helps us with our physical. I mean, even like if you go to a Catholic church, I'll just use a Catholic, you're like physically getting down and up and you're breathing and you're saying chants and you're keeping your somatic system, you're restating beliefs, like with a rosary or something, like you're restating your thought process to keep it regulated. You're going through emotional processing, like you're releasing things, you're confessing your sins, right, to the priest or something to try to feel better about the guilt maybe you're carrying or something. I mean, there's all these different parameters. And then, of course, it solves the existential crisis for us. It's like, well, what's the meaning of all this? What's going to happen after I die? I feel anxious about it. Oh, no, you're going to heaven, or, going to hell if you don't obey right, whatever, blah, 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 blah. So it feels like religions are set up, and I just use Catholics as an example of that, but like religion and religions are set up to help us regulate in a maintenance way. But what about the triage? And here I think comes in therapy and the modern sciences, because religion doesn't necessarily help us with the triage moments as much. I mean, you're bad and wrong for, acting badly or whatever, but it doesn't like have necessarily a practice to do when you're in those states. But secular therapy does.
I think some religions do.
Possibly.
Like rosaries, right?
Yes, that would be one.
Prayer beads. Absolutely. And rosaries, or like prostrating yourself in prayer to God.
But it wasn't as, I think it's not as, I think the science has come with a triage moment though for more immediate regulation. I guess it could be religion still.
Well, I mean, it definitely has in terms of like, say, drugs.
Yeah.
Right? Like there are certain, if a person's having a panic attack, you can take a drug for that to help calm down your soma.
Yes.
So I do think that modern technology has, I mean, one could argue that we've built a lot of systems in science and in spirituality and in psychology and in family. Like we've built actually a lot of things around trying to regulate our somas or just regulate ourselves as people. Yeah, for sure.
But it would make sense that as religion breaks down and we're not as involved in it,
yes,
on the planet, everyone's having mental health crisis and regulation issues.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we had things that helped us with that on a maintenance level all the time, but we don't have those as much anymore.
Right.
So now we turn to the sciences, we turn to therapy, we turn to philosophy, we turn to personality types, we turn to things like this to help make up for a big vacuum that was created when religion started to die.
Or we don't know where to turn,
also
and so
true.
We're constantly dysregulated.
And I would say, yeah, and there's probably the like therapy and sciences can help us with some more than others. I think the esoteric, intuitive things, I don't know if that's as good at helping us solve the big, what is all the meaning here? It's like, whatever your personal meaning is, shrug. And it's like, well, that doesn't help me feel better.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a very postmodern answer. I don't think people are very satisfied with.
Totally.
But the other ones, I think there is some, so I think there's some old religious frameworks that we can use as wisdom to guide us here, but also some modern ways to see this too. I think that's what I'm just bringing light to. I think there's a lot of different technologies we can use.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that was probably, well, I guess, we were defining terms. So we defined regulated. We should probably define dysregulated. And then there's actually two different kinds of co-regulation. One is a healthy co-regulation and one is an unhealthy co-regulation.
Codependent, maybe?
Yeah.
Right. So let's define these.
So self-regulation is the ability to consciously manage your internal state. And basically what that means is that you're adjusting yourself internally so that you don't become overwhelmed or too reactive to a situation that you're in, whatever the original trigger was. And so it could be, an external trigger, it could even be an internal trigger. But the ability to self-regulate means that when you're triggered, you have the capacity to get yourself back in in more of like a homeostatic state, right? You're not in those, like you talked about, those spike points. And if that means regulation, then dysregulation would obviously be the opposite. When you're dysregulated, you've got a breakdown of that ability to manage and modulate your internal state. And so it means a lot of, emotions and body reactions and thought processes and fears. All of those are rushing in and flooding in on you. And you're now in that spike point. You're now kind of like in a spiral. And so it feels, it can feel disorienting. It can feel paralyzing. It can feel overwhelming. When we go into like fight, flight, or freeze, that's a dysregulated moment usually of hypervigilance, assuming something is coming after you. And so that's what, anytime in the podcast, when we talk about regulation, we're talking about the ability to calm down your internal state. And dysregulated means you do not have the capacity, or at least you're not in that space in that moment.
Yeah.
Co-regulation means that you are processing mutually and intentionally with another person, and or at least the healthy version of it. And so you can help each other out. Like take, for example, like you said, a parent and child will get into a co-regulatory space because the parent is trying to train the child in how to regulate themselves. But you can also get into a co-regulated space with like a partner, like your life partner, your spouse. And that's it's almost like even if it's unspoken, it's a pact that the two of you are not going to do things that spike each other. In fact, you're going to, I'd argue like this is the agreement to de-escalate fights.
Okay.
This is the agreement to, to not add any further burden to the other person, but get back into a space. Maybe even you're like breathing together or calming down together or holding each other or whatever it is that, that will allow the other person to feel a little bit more safe.
So I think from my standpoint, when another person is at least emotionally or psychologically honest with themselves as much as they know, like like the offer is genuine, I see that as somebody that's trying to help co-regulate with me. Or you and I have this thing, and we've talked about this in other episodes, where in the early days, because of my past ex-marriage, my ex-wife would just end the conversation, slam a door, walk out, hang up the phone, drive away, and we would never talk about it again. So I had this like anxiety when we were in, you know, fights or something or an argument. And if you would leave the room just to get some space, I would follow you, and I'd be more like, no, we've got to solve this now. And you'd be like, I need some space, man. Right. And then we determined that you were going to give me a little signal to say, I'm not hanging up the phone. I'm going to go get some space. Or I'm not hanging up the phone, or not hanging up, just whatever you could say if you're upset. You leave the room, and I know in good faith that you don't want to just let this fizzle. You want resolution. So in that way, I believe that's a signal to help co-regulate, to like
100%.
You don't have to pursue Joel. You can stay in the state you're in, or you can drop it down, but I'm coming right back. I just got to go clear my head. And so that's an example maybe of healthy co-regulation. Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have the language now. I mean, as of like going, oh, that's what's going on in our fights. I would say now it's, I need to step out and self-regulate.
Yeah.
And so co-regulation would be you going, oh, if you need that space, go ahead and self-regulate. Like leave, you know, if you need to leave for a moment to go self-regulate and return, you would give me that space. It's the healthy version, like it respects autonomy. It respects each other's, it's basically having each other's back in self-regulation. Like you're not doing it for them. You just are preserving or like giving them better circumstances and more ideal circumstances for them to be able to self-regulate.
And I think the other thing is emotional honesty or intellectual honesty. That's what I was trying to say earlier. And it's like, if you accuse me of something that's going on for me, like let's say you say, I think you're doing this because you're insecure that I'm getting the credit for this thing and you're not. Let's say you said something like that. Yeah. And I immediately check in with myself, and I know you're right, but I don't want you to win in the moment.
Right.
Like being emotionally honest to say, like, even if I can't see, like, I'll explore that. Like, even if I'm like, you're right. If I just go, instead of just saying, no, that's not what's happening, and push back, I go, let me examine that. Let me get some space to see about that. I'm trying to be emotionally, and I don't do this all the time, trust me. It's like really hard to do. But being emotionally honest back, like what actually is striking, I feel like I'm giving my power away. It feels awful, but I believe it's an attempt to co-regulate in a positive way by being emotionally or intellectually honest.
Yeah.
Or intuitively or physically honest, right?
Yeah, I think honesty is a part of self-regulation for sure.
With the self and the other person.
And the other person.
As much as you know and are able to be honest about. And sometimes I can't actually let you have the win, I've noticed, but I try to at least be neutral and not deny you the truth of what you're saying. Like, I don't want to give you the win, but I at least not say, no, you're wrong, and I can't agree at all.
Yeah.
And I'm not perfect at this at all, but this is what I'm practicing right now, is to at least be neutral and be like, let me just look at myself around that. And so these are real specific, tangible things in a dynamic to help co-regulate, where I don't believe that dips into codependency yet, or the unhealthy version we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and in a moment like that, if I've called something accurate, I mean, if I'm in a healthy co-regulated space with you, then an accusation is not exactly like the best way to do that. Right.
Of course.
So, if I've made an like you're doing this because of this, right? Now, in a relationship, a pair bond relationship that is, you're out of the honeymoon period. You've been together for a while. You've had plenty of fights. You've got some baggage. The relationship has some baggage now.
Some wounding and hurts back and forth. Yep. Hurt feelings.
You did. Remember that one time you did this to me, and for some reason I'm holding on to it or whatever.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be moments when you're looking to the other person to regulate you, but not in the healthy way, right? Like not to give space for your regulation, but to do it for you. And then at that moment, one person in the relationship has to pause long enough to realize that that's the dynamic that's going on. And then to stop for a moment and go, maybe we just need a minute. Maybe we just need a little bit of space and to get back into a space of self-regulating. But like if a person, if you're throwing accusations at the other person, you're not creating a particularly self-regulating, scenario. Like you're triggering the other person and you're trying to get them into a fight.
I would also say that sometimes when people are calm and regulated, I interpret that as this person's just shut off this part of themselves, like their emotion or their thoughts or the reason they're able to be even keel is they don't feel anything, positive or negative, or they're not thinking, they're not processing in this at all, really. That's how they can keep it so neutral all the time. And those two people very rarely get like, I'm just thinking emotionally because it's the channel I notice the most of people that are like stoic. Like let's say there's a hardcore INT thinker from a personality standpoint, and they just never seem to ever be upset or raise their voice or get angry or get triggered. I'm like, they're probably not feeling things at all half the time. Like, I mean, they're feeling things, but like they're not, it's not actually, they haven't mastered regulation. They just don't ever allow it to start to have to regulate it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's what I think is happening for a lot of people. So I would probably pride myself on regulating things in my life that I've regulated this, but actually I just don't do it enough to even have the trauma in the first place. So I can be really above everyone else and feel like I have it all handled when I'm actually not really. I think this is my early life. I would just neutralize my emotions so much that it seemed like I was really even keel all the time. Once I started activating and tuning into my emotions, now I feel like a basket case sometimes, but it's because I'm feeling more. I'm allowing more feelings to come up. I'm allowing more content to surface around my feelings and emotions. Mm-hmm. And so it looks more chaotic than somebody who maybe just shuts that off completely. So I don't know. I think I envy those people and the credit they get for the regulation, the stoicism sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't know what to say to that because
I feel like they're cheating.
Yeah, I think that it's always it's like you don't know this is a thing. I mean, it makes me think of the competency model.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the competency model starts out with unconsciously incompetent. So you actually don't know how hard something is, and you don't know how bad you are at it because you actually haven't done it. Like the Sunday afternoon quarterback or
Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah, the Monday morning quarterback or the
armchair quarterback.
Armchair. That's what I was actually looking for.
I could have made that throw.
I could have made that throw. Yeah, it's like no, you can't. Like you can barely lift your beer. Anyway, but it starts out with that, and then it goes to conscious incompetence. And then from conscious incompetence, because you're actually doing the thing, and you now know how hard it is, so you now know how bad you are at it. And if you continue to work at something, then you go to conscious competence, which is like, no, I've done it enough so that I know I can do it well, but I still have to think about it, right? It's still a bit of a stretch. And then eventually, if you do something long enough and you gain enough expertise, you become unconsciously competent, which is like you're doing this thing well and you don't have to think about it anymore. And what I'm hearing you say is that like sometimes we're in the unconscious incompetence when it comes to self-regulation around certain channels or aspects of our lives because we just don't do that thing.
Yes.
Right. So we don't have to, we, quote unquote, don't have to self-regulate because we're actually just not entering the terrain at all. The challenge with that is that's as long as life doesn't force us in that space.
Yeah.
You know, like I can be as physically lazy as I want to, right?
Yes.
Like part of physiological or somatic self-regulation on a maintenance level is being in touch with my body and moving it and being connected to it and feeling it and understanding when it's changed or when something's wrong with it. But if I'm just not paying attention to it at all, then there might actually be something bad going on. Like as in like if I have a lump and I am not connected to my body at all, and I'm not paying attention to that thing, right? And the lump is something that like should probably go get, I should be getting it checked out, but I just never do because I'm not paying attention to it. Then all of a sudden it's a massive problem, and it wouldn't have been had I gotten it checked out before, but now it is because I've just completely ignored it. Like, is that me being self-regulated with my soma because I'm just not paying attention to it at all?
Yeah.
Well, actually, from that point on, now my soma is going to be very much out of my control, right? Like, it's going to be a major issue. I might have to go through some pretty extreme, procedures in order to get my health back. And so that's the process, right? The first one is like doing it at all and going like, oh, this is hard. And then getting into a space where it's like, oh no, this is really hard. This is actually really hard to do. And then eventually, if you do it long enough, you get to a place where it's like, it's hard, but I can do it.
Yes. And
then our goal with self-regulation, I believe, is to get to the unconscious competence, which it's like, I'm regulating because, like not out of like, a major stretch or sheer will or whatever, but I'm regulating because this is my habit. This is how I do it.
We have somebody in our life, you and I both know, that has an existential anxiety all the time about dying and what comes after death. Mm-hmm. And I was very dismissive of this energy. Like, this person's been struggling with this for a long time. And I remember during COVID, the very early stages of COVID, before I realized what was going on, like when I was like, oh my gosh, all this death and destruction. I have a little bit of a different view post, lockdown and COVID now of all this. But at the time I'm like, oh my goodness, I could actually die from this disease. Like, and people I love could die. And it really struck me just how much I hadn't been doing existential processing until a real life threat came into my life that I had to consider that this could take me out. There's a percentage, maybe it's not very high a percentage, but there's likelihood that this could be over very soon for me. Whoa, big question marks, lots of thinking around that. And I developed an empathy for this person in our life during that time period to go, okay, I know what that feels like now. I guess that's my point, is I had just neutralized that. My intuition had just neutralized thinking about those kinds of concepts in a way, partly because of my faith background, but partly just because I'm intuitive dominant. I don't necessarily draw those all the time up for myself. But now, not only do I have more of an existential processing I have to do, I think of other things too. Like what happens if like the grid goes down or certain things happen in our society that will cause disturbances and we are existentially threatened. And what does it mean for my children to grow up and live a good life in the next generation? And kind of COVID introduced this idea to me to begin to process that. So now I'm like, I have weird intuitions that come up now that I didn't have before COVID, post COVID, that I have to actually process. It's making more work for myself. And so I think that's what I was talking about. We all probably have a channel that we just decided to suppress or just neutralize, so we don't have to process there. And it, we have maintenance maybe on the other channels, but then all of a sudden this thing just flies up out of nowhere and we have to triage it and then figure out a maintenance plan when it begins to surface for us. And that might be somebody that's like a hardcore stoic thinker type that's just suppressed emotions their whole life. Now they're in some relationship that carbonates all these emotions and makes them feel these things. And now they got to contend with something they never had to contend with before. It's like distressing. It's like, what do I even do here? I feel so out of sorts. And from a personality type standpoint, it's usually our back seat in the car model or our more less preferred functions. I think now mine was intuitive, so it was my preferred function. Maybe I was overconfident there. I don't know.
Well, and the question is, when you were having existential spikes of dysregulation, how difficult was it for you to be able to get yourself back in a regulated space?
It wasn't too tough, I think, because it was I live in the world of intuition. Like it makes so much sense to me. So I was able to, I think, work through it. It wasn't that distressing, but it was distressing more than I expected it to be. Yeah. Because I had never really had to look at it before.
Yeah, it was an element that you weren't expecting, but because it lives in the realm of intuition, it wasn't, even though it was new, it wasn't a huge stretch. And I think that's how it works. I think our preferred functions in terms of regulation, even as a feeler, emotions are going to like dysregulate you, right? Or even as a thinker, there's going to be certain limiting beliefs, right, that are dysregulating to me. But because there are preferred functions, we're probably going to be it's going to be a little less unnerving. We're not going to be as desperate for other people to do our regulation for us, most likely. But that said, I think when it gets to our 10-year-old and our 3-year-old in the car model, or our tertiary and inferior in technical terms, I think that's when we really start looking to other people to regulate us. And particularly the 10-year-old or the tertiary function. That
resonates hard with me.
Yeah, we are trying to get other people to regulate us there like crazy.
Okay, so let's stop there then. And both of our 10-year-old or tertiaries are extroverted functions. But you mentioned in the definition, it's about internal states and internal regulation. Okay, so now immediately that creates a big question mark here. Let's unpack this. Maybe introvert versus extrovert. Is there a understanding we could create in this moment?
Yeah. So I think, did we define unhealthy co-regulation? I know we were going through our terms.
Let's briefly go through it.
I'll just do
briefly, just make sure in case.
Just to close the loop on that.
Yeah.
The unhealthy version of co-regulation is when you're actually trying to get the other person to do it for you.
Yeah.
And it creates things like enmeshment and codependence and a bunch of other like not very good things in the relationship. Basically, it's not giving the other person space and trying to set up the circumstances so they can self-regulate, but it's like looking to the other person to basically be your parent for you now, right? Like, you never got over needing your parent to kiss your boo-boo for you. You just never got over that. You never learned to do it, to create autonomy or resilience in self. So
would that be, I mean, I'm going to try to trigger a bit, but like a safe space at like a college or something that they talked about years ago. I don't think they're the thing anymore. Maybe they are. But a safe space is a place where you go to regulate emotions. Basically, or regulate some aspect of yourself. It's like a space we've carved out for you able to come to and regulate without any external pull.
Yeah.
here's a space you can go without any external stimuli to help bring yourself to a centered moment.
I think that they were originally intended to be healthy spaces. Like they were intended to be healthy co-regulatory spaces. Like the university was trying to provide, if you see the university or the institution itself and then the student body as like two different entities that create a relationship with each other.
Yeah.
I think it was originally intended to create a healthy co-regulatory relationship originally. Now,
whatever it's become, but that was the intent is what
I
we're
think
saying.
that was its original intent for safe spaces.
Yeah. Okay.
But I also do think that the frequency of people being triggered and needing safe spaces indicates a lack of ability to self-regulate, right? Like the space existing itself is not a problem, but the frequency of needing to use it on very small infractions, very, very small triggers, that I think that indicates that people create a codependent relationship with those kinds of spaces. They can. Like the original intent is for it to be healthy, but it can be used in an unhealthy way.
Just like anything.
It
can be healthy or unhealthy. Okay, I feel pretty good about that definition.
So to go back to the question you had of we have extroverted functions as our 10-year-old or tertiary. And so if we're trying to like get the other person to regulate us, isn't this an internal process? And I would actually say that all 8 functions are required for us to be self-regulators in order to regulate ourselves. Now they're different channels. And I would say the 4 channels, just like we mentioned before, are, sensing, which is the physiological somatic, thinking, which is the cognitive, feeling, which is the emotional, and then intuitive, which is the existential channel, right, of a self-regulation. But I think regardless of whether or not it is a maintenance, a practice that we do over time to ensure that we are in the best space possible, or whether it's a triage moment when we've been triggered and it's a spike point, I think both the introverted and the extroverted directions or attitudes of the functions can be brought in to help regulate. I don't think it's an internal state in the sense of like, I'm showing up this way. But I think both sides of these functions, both the introverted and the extroverted side, is really important. And I think it's because, so my definition of, or the way that I see the distinction between introverted and extroverted functions is that introverted functions are meant for processing and extroverted functions are meant for interfacing. And sometimes when we have a dysregulated moment, sometimes we need to interface in order to be able to get ourselves back in a good space. Like take, for example, if we are somatically dysregulated, we can process, we can sit, check in with our body, maybe do some breathing techniques, maybe get mindful, maybe just kind of, remember what we can, the comforts or the things that are familiar. But we could also go for a run, or, do some physical activity to get some energy out, and or go engage, or go hit a boxing. What are those called? The
punching bag.
We can go hit a punching bag for a while, and get some aggression out, and that can also help regulate us.
Yeah.
So I think we can both engage and we can also do processing work. When we're looking to the other person to regulate us for us, though, I think what that more looks like is what is the specific channel of that function and why is it dysregulated?
Yeah.
So for you, it's extroverted thinking or effectiveness, and for me, it's extroverted feeling or harmony. When you're looking to me or the outside world to regulate your extroverted thinking, or your 10-year-old or tertiary, it's usually very much extroverted thinking or effectiveness concerns.
Oh, I'm getting so many ahas right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you're speaking to this, like, we be fine. Well, I'll be like in my office or something, and all of a sudden I'll like see an email of a task I didn't get done last night that's already due. It's past due. It's like an hour late. But I also have to return like a car rental to the car rental in an hour. This task is late, and then Piper walks in. Hey, Dad, can you help me with this thing? And I'm like, oh crap, that school project. And then I'm like, and then you call me, and you're like you call me. You're like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, and I start like I'm immediately have like bottleneck of like all these tasks and things to do, and then I'll start to get emotional about it, and almost like frustrated, and I'll lament to you like, I can't handle this. I wish we'd blah blah blah, and you should have reminded me last night to do the thing, and like I might blame, but I'm just completely, and maybe it's more tasks than that too. all these like conflicting timelines and tasks and projects and things. Because I'm sitting there going, like, that seems absurd that I even get upset about that. Because like, if you think about our personal life path mentorship, I've stood in a live event, play acting as somebody's like family member, giving them full permission to rage at me, not hit me or hurt me, but scream at me and say all the nasty things you need to tell the person. I will stand here and just emote.
And just take it.
It doesn't bother me at all. Like I can just sit there. Other people would be really triggered by that, but they're just like screaming right up in my face, you know, just emoting, just anger and just horrible things at me, just trying to purge it out. And I'm like, I could do that all day. It doesn't, I mean, it sure affects me. I have to process later. It does. I do have to process, but it's not that big a deal. But just a couple tasks during a day that get bottlenecked, I'm like losing my mind. I'm like, I can't handle the extra. And I feel so silly and dumb there. Like, why did it even like have to bottleneck? But it's so true that I can't, it just feels so much bigger than a big emotional lift for me. And it becomes emotional because I'm probably making it emotional later. But as you're saying this, I'm like, man, that is true. I think that it's still an inner game to regulate it, but I'm having the materials in the outside world.
Well, and it could also be that you meet it where it's at. So, and we'll talk about this in a future episode, but how does one self-regulate cognitive, sort of your cognitive state? Well, you do it by meeting it at a cognitive state, which is like, okay, extroverted thinking effectiveness, one of the reasons why it's overwhelming you is because it's all coming at you at the same time. What does that function need? That function needs a linear progression of tasks. It needs to know what to do first, second, third, and fourth. And and it just kind of needs to go, all right, how do I get through this? I do it one bite at a time, right? And I just do this, and then I do, and so you self-regulate in the same channel that the spike point happened. And so maintenance would be like you're regularly doing these things so that you don't have those moments of spike points. But in a spike point moment, the triage is to go, okay, where's the dysregulation coming from? And I think that's why it's such a great, to your point, a topography, and why we can't just code everything as physical or emotional. Because if that's the case, then like in those moments when it's been extroverted thinking or effectiveness that is the dysregulated part, right? The thinking, the cognitive part. And I go, you need to, and I see you as being anxious, or I see you as being like emotional. And I say to you, you need to process your emotions.
I explode. I'm like, it's not my emotions, which is crazy because it is. But that's not the source of it.
That's not the thing that's dysregulated, even though you might experience, like I might see it as emotional and it might become emotional, but that was not the point of origin. And
so I feel like you're misunderstanding me in that moment. Now I'm upset with you potentially. I mean, this doesn't happen all the time, but I can totally see this for myself. And I'm frustrated because it feels like you're managing the wrong thing for me. And I'm almost like, no, that's not, and you will even offer like comfort or emotional support and I'm like almost upset at the offerings. I want to just knock it out of your hand. That's my instinct because I want help with the thing that I think is the actual issue. And I must be unconsciously feeling like, okay, create enough distress emotionally. People will see I need help with this. But it's clearly a bad strategy. I need to figure out a better, and I have been figuring this out. And it's doing things, like you said, more sequence, more often, more on a timeline and stuff. I don't want to make this all about me. I gotta back out of this, but I'm just trying to illustratively say I'm noticing how this kind of works in my 10-year-old or tertiary process.
Well, and we started this podcast out with my recognizing that I was dysregulated in my emotions. Actually, it was an emotional feeling thing for me, and I wanted you in those moments. Regardless of what the actual, like, there's probably a lot of stuff that can be deconstructed in the psychology of it and everything. But I just know that in those moments when I'm upset, what I really want is I just want you to come over and give me a hug. I want you to hug me and tell me you love me and tell me that we're good. Because I think I said it could probably be deconstructed in a lot of different ways. But I think what it really comes down to is that I have a memory of us being in discord, right? Like the muscle memory is that we're fighting. And now this is proof. Now it's proof. That's right. That we're in discord or we're out of harmony with each other. And I just want you to come give me a hug and hold me and tell me it's going to be okay and that you love me and that, like we're not recording podcasts just because like I'm not being used, right? Like, I'm not just here to
Not a to-do. I'm not a to-do item.
I'm not just a to-do item. Like I'm a person and you see me as a person and that you love me in this relationship and blah.
Yeah.
Like that's what I want you to say. Do you say any of those things in those moments? Of course not, right? Because you're like problem solving, right? You're like, you're trying to meet me at a thinker place, right? You're going like, well, if we just record the podcast ahead of time, right?
We'll have to do like 4 in a day.
Yeah,
we get more on a schedule because I'm trying to solve my TE stuff.
That's right. You're like, the solution.
Stuff.
The solution is to get on a schedule and to get ahead of the game. And I'm like, and all I want is a hug and for you to tell me that I'm precious and that you love me and you think I'm great. So it's like we're both doing it to each other. I wouldn't say all the time. I mean, I hope that I don't give the impression that we're constantly fighting or battling, but it is it's a real relationship. We do battle, right? We do get into fights and it's like a real life, right? We're living real life here. But since I had that aha, I don't know if we've fought since then. We've had moments of tension, right? We've had moments of like, I'm frustrated. But as soon as I realize it now, I'm like, I'm dysregulating. Or I'm dysregulated. Am I trying to make it his problem? If I'm trying to make it his problem, he literally can't regulate me. He can't do it. So I'm asking him to do the impossible and I'm getting mad at him when he's not succeeding, which is really unfair. So every time I get salty or upset, I just go, what part of me is dysregulated? And I walk through those 4 components. And sometimes it's somatic. Sometimes I'm like hungry. Right? I'm just hungry or tired.
Had too much coffee.
That's right. Exactly. And I'm like, that's how I'm dysregulated. That is not his problem. That's my problem. And I've got to go figure it out. Is it cognitive? Right? Am I anxious about getting things done? Am I, over ruminating on a limiting belief? Is it something to that effect? If so, again, I have to bring that in-house. So, I think and if it's emotional, and if it's existential or intuitive, all of these need to be brought to me and I need to regulate.
Do you find yourself having less patience for me when it's thinking? Because it's like, it's so obvious to you as an introverted thinking accuracy person, ENTP preferences. So thoughts are easier for you to regulate because it's a stronger preferred function for you. It's a stronger place for you. So it's almost like, you have less. I wonder if I have less emotional patience for people that can't emotionally. I guess I have patience for it. I've got a lot of capacity for it, but my patience runs out at a certain point when I'm like, come on, okay, I get you need a little bit of space to figure your stuff out, but can you please get past this now and move into the next phase of? Can we not keep this emotional the whole time? Like I think I have a certain clock on patience around that. Do you have that for thinking that you've observed?
I don't think so because it took me so long to regulate my own thinking since I was raised in a context that didn't teach me to do it at all. I was raised in a context that told me to hand my brain over and it would be entirely regulated by the religion I was raised in. Back to your point of like religion. I think sometimes we hand over way too much regulation to things like religion.
Or secular religions. There's a lot of them on the scene right now too.
There are so many quote unquote religions that remove God. It's crazy. But yes, we're handing things over to paradigms. We're handing things over to influencers. We're handing things over to other people to regulate us in our behalf so much. And I did that with thinking. And it was such a battle for me to get into a place where I feel fully self-regulated with thoughts. That even like in moments when I'm not, I'm very distressed by it. I'm like, how am I not regulated here? But I think because it was such a uphill climb for me, I have a lot of patience with other people in the thinking category.
So as long as I keep it in the thinking category and I don't bring emotion into it, you'd have endless patience for it. It's
yes.
When I make it emotional or I have emotion like anxiety or thinking about the future, that's a very head thing for me. It doesn't feel emotional for me. Yeah. Anxiety doesn't feel, I mean, it is sort of an emotion,
yeah,
but it's very heady, but you interpret it as an emotion and you can't handle it. You're like, I cannot handle anxiety. Mm-mm. And you back way off and you have very limited patience for me being in an anxious state. So I've learned to not emote that way as much. I'm trying not to trigger that for you to, I got to get away from him. He's too anxious.
And you're raised in an exclusively feeler family. So you're working with a very old false premise that just does not work in our relationship, which is that I need to amp up my emotions so people will pay attention and care.
Yes.
And
that is the opposite for you.
100% the opposite.
Yes.
The more emotional somebody is, the less I'm taking them seriously if they're trying to problem solve. Like, because to me, emotion just creates bias. It's like, we'll never solve the problem if we're emotional. Now, that's not necessarily or empirically true. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that that's how that's my bias. My bias is if you're being emotional, we're not going to get anything done. And in a pair bond relationship like ours, I'm slurping up your emotion, and I definitely can't think when I'm emotional. Like, if I'm filled with anxiety or filled with grief or filled with anger, like, my brain just shuts down. For you, sometimes emotion helps things get clearer. Like, it's this dance.
The more intense I get, the more clarity I get.
And I'm the exact opposite. The more emotionally intense I am, the more I just, like, I can't even, like, I can't form words, much less whole sentences. Like, I just go, I'm now in a space. I can't get out of the space. So I think, I think for me, it's emotions. And it's not even so much when other people are having emotional spikes and dysregulated, as long as I can keep, like, a really nice, healthy distance from them, I'm fine. But if they're somebody in my life, if they're an intimate of mine, then I'm taking on their emotion.
Yeah.
And then I don't have a lot of patience. But here's the other thing. I've realized that when I'm coaching, like you said, in Personality Life Path, we'll have these situations where somebody will, like, work out some trauma on us or work out some stuff on us. And I realized in that moment of coaching that I am in I've entered the contract of helping them co-regulate in the healthiest way possible. So I'm there. I'm, like, 100% there. And I know that once the Personality Life Path, like, event ends, then I'm going to have to go do some post-processing, and I'm going to have to sort of do my own emotional regulation later in order
absorbed a lot.
Because I've absorbed so much that later on I'm going to have to find ways to cycle it out.
Which we're still exploring those ways, right?
Yeah.
That's a tough one for you.
It's very difficult. I'm not, emotional things I'm still learning. I'm not naturally adept at them. And so, this whole process is something that I'm learning over time. But that said, I know I've already, like, I made that bargain. I entered knowing that. However, if I'm in like you and I, if I feel like you are trying to get me to regulate your emotions in an unhealthy way, I realized I get furious because I don't feel qualified for that. This is not my wheelhouse. This is not something I'm good at. Why on earth would you ask that of me? But what's funny is that you're like, I don't ask that of you. I'm actually trying to get you to cognitively regulate me. So,
which still isn't a great ask. I'm not, but it's at least we know what category it's in.
And that's what I mean. It's like, as soon as I saw this thing, I was like, oh, this explains so many things. Like, I'm understanding all the pieces on the chessboard now. I get it. I get what's going on. And so I think that this can be a game changer, or at least it is for me right now. There's just one of the reasons why I want to talk about it on the podcast. If we can understand that, that most of our battles with other people is actually us trying to get them to regulate us. And when they don't succeed, we are upset. So that's the first one. That's the first insight and aha, or at least for me. The second one is I need to know what channel of dysregulation I'm on. What's the channel of it? And so I can meet it where it's at. And the third one is this is a spike point. So I need to do something to acknowledge on that same channel. I need to acknowledge the spike point. I need to know that this is not a simple thing, that this is something that I'm probably going to have to do something kind of not drastic, but I'm going to have to do something like big enough to meet the spike itself.
Triage.
I'm going to have to do triage. Exactly. And the fourth aha is, and it's really important to be maintenancing other times to stay regulated in all four channels. And all of that is like, okay, that's a responsibility that I as an adult am willing to take on.
We've talked about defining these things, regulation, co-regulation, healthy versus unhealthy versions of it. We talked about this triage versus maintenance. We talked about the introvert versus extrovert parts of ourselves. All of us have cognitive parts that are more extroverted focused and parts that are more introverted focused. And we talked about how we look at those. And then we talked about the 4 styles of regulation. Mm-hmm. What else do we need to talk about before we close this episode out? Because we're going to talk more specifically about these in the next few shows.
Yeah, no, I think I feel pretty complete on this. But I would like to, and I think we're going to do it for the next 4 episodes. And they don't have to be long episodes. They might even be shorter ones. We'll see. We tend to be jabberjaws.
Good luck. Are you going to be here on the show with me? Or is it just going to be me talking? One of us could probably do it short, but both of us, good luck.
It's true. Never mind.
Don't make promises.
They may or may not be short. They're probably going to be 2 hours apiece. Who knows? But that said, what I'd like to do is
verbal regulation.
Yeah, verbal regulation.
Conversational regulation.
That's right.
Shut up.
As opposed to verbal incontinence. I think we should do an episode for each channel and do a bit of a deep dive into what it looks like when each of these 4, the physiological, the emotional, the cognitive, and the existential. What does it look like when they're regulated? What does it look like when they're dysregulated? And have a little bit of a deeper dive conversation into each one of those in order for us to pick up some tools to be able to do a better job of self-regulating.
All right, let's do it. So if you've been listening along, we'd love for you to come over to personalityhacker.com. And directly below this episode, you can leave a comment, ask a question, share your story about regulation, co-regulation, dysregulation. What's your experience with this? Have you noticed that there's parts of you that show up more and needing more regulation than others? I think also the personality life path would be something I'd recommend if you're somebody that's in transition or you want to know all these parts of yourself. Get the map of the entirety of your life, not just the cognitive functions that are in your car model that you're aware of, but also the shadow functions. Man, those pull things from the shadows all the time. And we talk about hard to regulate things. It's hard to regulate something you can't even see it's happening to you. Mm-hmm. So the personality life path is designed over 8 weeks to go into every one of those cognitive functions of personality that we all have to engage with. Your personality will tell you which ones you prefer and are strengths for you, and which ones are more uncertain and that you don't maybe look at all the time. And again, in the shadow, maybe jerking your chain from back there. So come over to personalityhacker.com and check that out too. If we're in an enrollment time period for the PLP, I think you would really appreciate going through that yourself, especially if you're in transition, especially if you'd like to tune into some of these elements. If this is resonating with you, I think that's a recommendation I'd like to make today.
Yeah, and the personality life path, I think there's personalitylifepath.com.
Yes, yes, I believe that's the website.
That will tell you what the classes coming up are.
Yeah.
In the future.
I think you can find it on the main website too.
And the main website, personalityhacker.com/events will tell you all of our events coming up. Profile training, personality life path, and then any of the extra ones we have going on.
Absolutely.
Yep. And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, well, that makes me really happy. And you should totally do it.
You read every one.
I read every single one. I do. And it's a little adrenaline shot in the arm to keep going. You can also find us on YouTube. We have a video podcast. You might be watching us right now. If you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe and hit the bell for future episodes. And you can also leave a comment under the YouTube video.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.